this, yep, the mic is on. We're good with that, okay. Cool. Sweet. All right. So almost every time I tell somebody that I used to work in marketing and then I learned to code and now I'm a programmer, the response is, wow, that's so cool. I could never do that. And why? Why is this the case that grown-ups who are not already in engineering or IT developer-focused types of roles think that they can't make this transition into a technical career? And what can we do to make it less intimidating? And let's back up a second. Why do we even care? Hi, my name is Brittany, and I'm super passionate about helping people who are not currently in tech careers transition to tech careers. Why? Well, because I'm one of them. I didn't grow up doing well in math or science. My parents weren't programmers. I never even really considered option of programming, like just didn't even really think about that. And so I studied marketing at university and started working in marketing, and it was fine, but I was kind of yearning for something more logical and concrete. Funnily enough, I thought I wanted to study programming and become a coder because I wanted something that was more objective and less opinionated, which shows just how little I truly knew about it. I eventually did end up here, but there were some roadblocks along the way, and I am now a full-time engineer at Elastic, working on our internal apps team for creating tools for elasticians. But it took me years to learn how to code and make the transition, and to be totally honest, I got really lucky along the way, despite having some roadblocks. And just out of curiosity, how many of you here grew up on like the traditional tech path, like, you know, you studied computer science in college and like you've been doing that all your life? Okay, all right, and I'm assuming everybody else is, on the other hand, like me, you didn't start there. Yeah, raise your hands if you didn't start there and you found your way over here. That's awesome, that's awesome. And so I'm super happy we have both types of you, and there's honestly different challenges both ways. But many people, specifically women and other marginalized groups, just can't imagine themselves being a programmer. And if they can, they face obstacles with getting there and actually having a successful transition. So I'm going to show you some of the roadblocks that I faced and some of the different things that are preventing more folks from getting into tech. And I'll include my stories, but others as well. But don't worry, this isn't going to be a gloom and doom type of talk. I'm going to give you some specific action items and things that we can all walk away with and take from here. So first of all, you're probably thinking, wait a second, is this talk about helping women get into tech careers or about helping non-technical folks get into tech careers? And the answer is yes. This talk isn't just about women, although I think we can all agree it's time for us to actually start doing something about helping get more women on our teams rather than talking about it. But aside, yes, thank you. But aside from just women, the whole point of this talk is that it's really hard for anyone who is making this journey and, you know, currently working in marketing or you know, doing anything else to make this sort of journey. And unfortunately, it's especially hard for some other groups, and there's just a lot of systemic things in place that are making that the way it is, but there's still some things that we can do to help. So we talk about wanting more women and underrepresented groups on our teams, but what does that have to do with non-technical folks? Well, you can try to reach more women before they decide on a career by going to their middle schools and high schools and talking to them. And we definitely should be doing that. But if you don't find them there, where will you find them? The answer is not here in tech. You'll find them primarily in gendered caretaking roles, things like nursing, education, business assistants, and things like that. I found some data from the US Department of Labor that showed employed women over the ages of 16, and it showed like rows and charts of like, here's all the different types of jobs they have, and they all fall in those sort of categories. You don't even see like a line way at the end or anything for women who are in IT related roles or front-end programmers or system admins or anything like that. They don't even make up enough data to show up on the chart, and many of them are very happy in their roles, of the other things they're doing and aren't looking for something different, but some of them just don't realize that that's actually an option. Meanwhile, you take a look at these stats from Stack Overflow, and you can see that a majority of people who are developers are male, straight, and white. So why do we keep looking in pools of developers and then being surprised that we still don't have any women, non-white, non-hetero people on our teams? Also, aside from more diversity on our teams, let's get real about these fresh perspectives that we keep talking about too. We always talk about hiring new people and wanting to get those fresh perspectives on our team. And usually what we mean by that is fresh like from another company or from another industry. But what about people from a completely different field? According to the Harvard Business Review, people with different backgrounds, they actually are able to solve problems better together because of those different ways of processing knowledge and the way of facing information and going through it. So people from these non-traditional backgrounds bring so many skills that complement their technical abilities. For instance, with my marketing background, when I'm coding, I'm thinking first about the user. I'm like, how do we make this make sense for the user? And I'm also thinking about, are we sure we actually even need this? Like, have we done any product research? Do we know for sure this is a feature more than just one person wants and will use? And same when it comes to like reading docs or writing technical communication. Because I haven't been doing this all of my life, I'm able to kind of, once I finally understand something, help put it in lingo that makes sense for the rest of us, as I like to say. So let's go through this typical journey someone might take on their path moving into a dev job, using my own story, but also some others as well. So let's start from the beginning. What is stopping, or rather not even starting, people from considering a career in tech? Okay, so you're probably not actually saying this out loud, or at least I hope not, but many people act as if this is the case, that girls aren't into coding. And take Amber, for instance. So her parents discovered this programming course, and she was in high school, and they discovered this course, and they were like, oh, okay, and they got it for their son, Amber's brother. Well, as he was going through the course, Amber sat behind him, just completely enamored with the content, like following along, like just kind of peeking over his shoulder. And her parents were like, oh, she's actually into it too. And so they ended up getting the course for her as well. She went through it, was one of the best in the course, continued learning more programming skills afterwards, and eventually, where is she now? She's a developer at a local utility company. So she was into programming, but her parents didn't even think of that as an option. So what do we do? How do we know if someone might be interested in programming or want to pursue a technical path? We ask them. I'm not trying to be snarky on this slide. This is just literally the point. Next time you see an article about something cool that somebody built and you're tempted to just share it with certain members of your family, expand it a little bit, because you don't know who might be interested in that. And next time you're shopping for gifts for your nieces and nephew, don't get building toys for your nephews and dollhouses for your niece. And also, when you're picking out electives for your kids in high school, don't assume one kid wants computer apps and another one wants art. Another roadblock is not seeing people that look like us. Whenever I saw developers, they were often men and often people who'd been coding their whole lives. So since I didn't see other women who were successfully navigating a career transition and learning to code, I assumed it wasn't possible or just wasn't really even an option. I also had no idea that there was literally an organization called Lesbians Who Tech because, well, they're already working with developers and people in tech, not necessarily lesbians who don't yet know they can tech. Since I've become a developer, I've started to see more people like me and learn their stories. And like you all here, there's definitely a lot of us out here who do exist. But for some reason, we seem to think only other developers are the ones who are interested in hearing our stories, when the truth is, it's actually the people outside of this field who are interested to hear, oh, maybe I could do that too. So yeah, if you look different and if you feel safe and comfortable to do so, then please be loud and proud and share your story. And if you're looking at your team at work and you only see people who look just like you, then call that out, because that means other people are looking at your team and not seeing themselves fit in there. Another roadblock is a limited view of what engineering is. I used to think programming was writing a bunch of lines of code and yelling at computers all day, and it kind of is. But it's actually, engineering is much more than that. So think about how many other things we use that follow along that sort of terminology. So think about like social engineering, for instance. That's the idea of creating an experience and pushing people towards that. It's not really math or engineering per se. And so think about how many other different careers and roles are just people solving problems in different ways, taking an input and getting an output and critically thinking through logical steps to get somewhere. For example, creating a recipe, making a lesson plan, fixing bugs in people's bodies. All of these things can be considered engineering, and some of these already consider technical components that we just wouldn't consider technical. I spend a lot of time working with automation in tools in like Zapier, If This Then That, and Trello, and HubSpot, and I love doing that sort of thing. I loved thinking about, ooh, okay, if I start with this and then do this, this, and this, and eventually get here, here's what I need to happen, and here's the unintended side effect of that. And I also love doing that with spreadsheets. I love taking like raw data and then just using functions and formulas to create dashboards and projections and forecasts. And once I realized all of that was engineering just with a different syntax, it started to feel totally achievable. So, hiring managers and future hiring managers. Think about this next time you're looking for a new teammate. Rather than focusing on looking for just people with skills in JavaScript or TypeScript or React or whatever, think outside the toolbox. I know of a fellow teammate who she's on our support engineering team, and she was hired not for her technical skills, but for her ability to communicate with customers. And she was able to learn the technical skills, and she's now on par with everyone else on the team. The technical skills can be taught. It's these softer skills that can be really hard to find. All right, so let's say you've overcome these obstacles and you can picture it. Maybe you could be a programmer. But now what? Unfortunately, we've still got a few roadblocks in our path to this direction. So this is a true story. I was sitting by the pool one day reading The Pragmatic Programmer, and some guy came up to me, and he was also a developer, and we were talking for a couple minutes, and it was a great conversation. Then all of a sudden, he just goes, "Oh, you'll be a great engineer. You're pretty, so everyone will do your work for you." And I was tempted to leave this story out because I was like, this is obviously a reason that people are not going to want to come to this field, is because comments and sexist bias like this. But a coworker pointed out to me that one, for people who haven't experienced that, you may not know this is a thing. Unfortunately it is. And for those of you who have experienced this, then you might take assurance in knowing you're not the only one. And this isn't just for women, by the way. This happens for any other marginalized group. One of my coworkers in his former role, he was asked not to speak with certain conservative customers because of his sexuality. He was told that if he did have to talk to them, to not use a gay voice. So suffice to say, sexism is alive and well in the industry, and a lot of folks just don't feel safe or wanted. So this action item is pretty simple. If you want to make a comment to someone about how well they will or won't perform in their career based on how they look, what they believe, or where they came from, just don't do it. All right, now when it comes to boot camps, believe it or not, they're not the savior that a lot of people think they are. And while many people do believe still, unfortunately, that you have to have a 4-year degree in computer science to get a programming job, that's not true, thankfully. You don't even really need a boot camp or any sort of formal certification. But that being said, there's still some people who like to have some sort of organized path that can kind of lead them through and make sure they're studying and learning the right things. It's me, I am some people, and when I started looking for boot camps and seeing things like Hack Reactor and Flatiron that were $10,000 and full-time for a couple months off work, I was glad that those were options for some people, but that wasn't really an option for me. I didn't have $10,000 laying around, and honestly, I wasn't confident enough in my abilities to take a couple months off work to learn a new skill and hope I'd be good enough at it to get another job. So because of that, I kept looking around, and eventually I discovered Academy, which offered a self-paced boot camp that was exactly what I was looking for. It was only about $700 at the time. I think it's gone up since then, just like the price of guacamole. But it was exactly what I was looking for. It was a self-paced sort of course, but also had a schedule that you could follow. So you knew, okay, roughly here's where you should be, but if you need to take a day off or a week off, it's totally fine. You just pick back up where you left off. And it was a good combination of text and video and super helpful instructors and a really good student community as well. And you had some of those algorithm sort of leak code sort of problems that you practice, but there was also a big focus on the projects and actually building things as well. So that was really cool. So yeah, please help me spread the word about smaller courses like these, because they don't have the same big budgets like Hack Reactor and Flatiron and all the other ones do for promoting their content. So, and I don't really see a ton like these. There may be, but yeah, if you know about them, please like help me recommend them to people who are learning how to code. Okay, so this advice, the just start coding and Google when you get stuck. This is our favorite thing to say to people when they're like, all right, I'm in HR and I want to be a programmer. So this is what we tell them. And I hate to tell you, this advice is such a blocker. It's almost like if someone were to come up to you and say, okay, how do I get to Wisconsin from here? And you're like, oh, just drive down the street. And like when you get, stuck or have a question, just like ask somebody on the road. Like technically kind of, yeah, that'll work, but that's terrible and super intimidating. Like, how far should I need to go? Like, is there a direction? Is there like a main highway I should be on the lookout for? So it's really well-intentioned advice, and I get it now that I'm on this side of things, but it's very overwhelming when you're new to all of this. So my best advice here is just be specific when people ask you how to get started. I like to actually have a list of resources ready that it's actually a Trello board that I just love to share, and it has a list of articles, people to follow, courses, Alt Academy's bootcamp, very specific things to help you actually take action and go do things. And if you're mentoring someone, get to know them and their style. If they're more of a jump in and let me swim and come help me when I'm stuck, or if it's hey, can you show me which part of the pool to get in first? Make sure to meet them where they are. Okay, so we can see ourselves coding, and while there's definitely some stuff working against us, we're willing to push through, and we're going to learn and work towards a technical career transition. Well, what on earth is stopping us now? So I already mentioned that I worked full-time while learning how to code, and that was because I couldn't afford to stop working and not make money and pay money. So I appreciate that it was an option to learn on the side, but it's still really tough. It's hard to work all day and exercise your brain and then have to turn it on nights and weekends to do this sort of stuff. Sometimes your brain just needs a break. And admittedly, I had a consistent work schedule, generous PTO, no kids. For a lot of others, just surviving the day doesn't really leave much left over. And now that I'm a developer, I know that you can't just brute force your way into solving a bug or building a feature. It just doesn't work like that. Your brain needs space to breathe and play. Why do you think all of our offices have ping pong tables and video games? Or why is the most common debugging advice to go take a walk? But unfortunately, that's not the space most of us get when we're learning how to code. And instead, we're just beating ourselves up because we don't have much time and we're stuck on this problem and we can't figure it out. And a lot of nights, I just be so mad and be like, man, maybe I'm really not cut out for this because I can't figure this out. But how did I get through it? People would encourage me that maybe I shouldn't compare myself to people who get to use their brains all day to solve problems like this. Here's another area where I recognize I got lucky. I wouldn't be where I am if Elastic hadn't been so supportive in this journey. And I recognize that that's something that's quite rare. So when I first started working at Elastic, I worked in marketing, and I was very committed to that role, but expressed a desire to learn some more technical skills. And eventually that goal turned into I'd like to work full time as in a technical role at Elastic. And Elastic's had my back the entire way by my manager in marketing giving me time that I can actually spend each week with dev teams at Elastic, by being part of our engineering mentor program, and being paired with an engineer who would hop on calls with me every week, and he would drive and I would ask questions, and he'd explain everything like I was 5, and sometimes we'd switch and I would drive and he'd kind of help guide me, and it was a great experience to see what it's like to actually work in a developer team and triaging issues and making pull requests and things like that. So it was an incredible experience, and eventually this turned into me working with another team for a couple hours a week that they pushed to get a headcount for me, which turned into a full-time role. So here I am. So once again, I was really lucky, but many companies aren't thinking about their employees for the value that they could have by expanding those skills. Rather, they're just seeing them where they're at right now. But some companies actually do think like Elastic. For instance, Adidas and Zapier, they have dedicated programs that you can apply to be in, where you spend half your time in your current role and the other half of your time learning these technical skills to move into a full-time role doing those things at that company. So see if you can start a program like that at your company. If you're a founder, create it. If not, then advocate for it. And then lastly, when you're learning how to code, you don't even know the words to Google, and you're able to dedicate about 15 minutes at a time to your projects. It's really easy to get stuck and feel like you'll never be able to get unstuck. And thankfully, I think this is where our community really shines. I've never met a group of people so willing to help other people for no other reason besides just, wanting to help. And whether it's strangers online in Stack Overflow or Reddit or TikTok, or real life people. Like I would have, real life mentors who'd be willing to hop on a call with me on Friday nights or weekends to help me with something I was stuck with in my boot camp. And so thank you for doing that, and please keep doing that, because that's exactly what we need. And having so many people to help me through that made sure I never really got stuck, and that I was able to actually get past that stickiness. Otherwise, I probably would have just given up when I was like, stuck on something and all I'd done wrong was leave a comma in the wrong place or something like that. So that's a good bit of obstacles. But what do we do with all of that? Hopefully you've taken some action items from what I've said just already, but this is really important to me, and I want everyone here to go and do something about this. So I'm gonna wrap it all up in one slide and give nobody any excuses. So I've grouped these actions by the groups they're recommended for, and we'll start with the ones that anyone in this room can take regardless of your path. I've talked about the mentorship program. Please, I think this makes a huge difference. Like, if you can't make a program at your company, then at least try to advocate for it in some way. Create a Slack channel called Learn to Code and just share resources in there and be available when people have questions, or help introduce people to more light technical things to kind of ease them in. And speaking of them easing them in, whether that's on that Slack channel or your social media or just talking to friends and family, help people understand that tech is more than just, oh, I built an app overnight. Like sometimes it's just like automating something in your spreadsheets or connecting your calendar to some other tool that you use with Zapier. Along with that, expand your definition of an engineer. So again, when you're looking for people on your teams, or just even when you're thinking about if someone may want to be an engineer, expand that, because you may be looking at a lot more engineers than you realize, and those people may be encouraged to know that they could be one. So don't hesitate to mention that. And for those of you who have spent most of your life in tech and have a traditional path, here's some things that you can do to help. First of all, don't try to pretend you're a perfect developer. Please show your mistakes. There's so many times that I'll be so caught up on something that I'm worked on, and I'm like, this took me, a day, and I was completely stuck on it. It's just because I don't belong here. And then later in a stand-up that week, a more senior developer will mention they got tripped up on the same thing. And that's super helpful. Sometimes it's just what we do is really hard. Also, don't be a tech bro, unless you want to be a Seattle tech bro on TikTok, in which case that is allowed. But when I say don't be a tech bro, I mean like, some of the obvious things, like don't make sexist comments, but I also mean like, don't just argue that there's one language or one framework for everything, and because what that ends up doing is it really just like belittles people who are trying to learn. So if you can, it's great to have opinions, but don't let it be the end all be all. And then lastly, if you're like me and you haven't had the typical path, you can do all of these things, but I especially need you to share your story. You don't know who might be encouraged by it or who might see you and think, hey, if you can do it, then maybe I can do it too. So that's it, nothing crazy or impossible, just some small actions we can all take. And I really appreciate you all coming to this talk and listening. Feel free to post some questions in the AMA channel, and I'm happy to look for and get to all of them. I have QR codes for these slides, and Carter, you're gonna like this. I've got my Cascadia Connect here, so connect with me. Right now, you can do it. Carter's gonna show you how.
Okay, hold on.
We're holding.
You should have warned me.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, what was the fun in that?
Carter, I'm gonna push you off the stage. There's like 2 minutes. I'm kidding.
Yes!
Yay! Yes. So, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
That talk was amazing. Thank you so much.